Hello guys, so this is an example game that I played online that we're going to analyze and study the tactics that are involved in this game. So here in this game I played black, and the opening goes like this: e4, d5. So this is the Scandinavian defense. E takes d5, queen takes d5, and now he moved c4. At this point I decided to move my queen to a5. So this is the Mieses-Kotroc variation of the Scandinavian defense. Knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e2, e6, castles, bishop d6, d4, and now I moved c6. So at this point white has a strong center, and it is tempting for white to actually push the pawn on c file. So that's what he did. c5. Now I retreated my bishop to e7, and at this point I'm actually seeing a weakness on white's position here, and that is the backward pawn on the d file. So the d4 pawn is backward because there will be no pawns at the back that will be able to support it, and I have a semi-open file on d file, and I can actually exploit that weakness in a matter of time. So at this point white continued by occupying that strong diagonal. Bishop f4, I castled. a3, attempting to kick my queen on the next move. So I retreated, queen d8, queen d2, knight b to d7, rook a to d1, knight d5. Now at this point, if white captures my knight, then I will be lacking the central pawns, and will open the e file, and maybe I have the chances of occupying it first. But white did here is bishop d3, which is a mistake, and I'll show you why it's a mistake. Because after bishop takes f3, white has a double pawn on f file, and double pawns are not good, especially in the middle game and end game, because it's actually a weakness that can also be exploited. So at this point we have actually three weaknesses in white's position: the backward pawn on d4, the double pawns on the f file, and also the king is semi-exposed because of the opening of the g file. So the next move here is knight takes f4, queen takes f4, and now this is an important move, g6. So this avoids the probability or possibility of white exploiting the h7 square, because the bishop on d3 is pointing at it, and it's just a matter of time when white will be able to make an attack on that diagonal. So I immediately created a move, or made the move g6 to avoid that, and also give space for my bishop if ever I want to move it to g6 and then to g7 or h8. So the next move here for white is knight to e4, and I don't want to exchange my bishop with his knight, so I moved knight to f6, challenging the knight on e4. He went knight g3, and now knight to d5, attempting to quick take the queen. And at this point, he moved his queen to d2, bishop g5 now, and then queen to e2. And at this point, I moved knight to f5. So knight to f4. So now I am slowly advancing my pieces towards his king. So knight f4 is an important move, and it depends on the response of white here. So supposed to be the best move is queen e4, but he moved queen to c2 here, and now I have the opportunity to exploit the backward pawn further by doubling my attack on that square by moving my bishop to f6. And here he decided to open the line of the rook to the d4 pawn, and here I moved bishop takes d4, and then he moved b4, b5, kicking the bishop, and he took the pawn by en passant or pass pawn. Who would not, right? Okay, a takes b6, rook f e1, c5. So here I cemented the bishop on d4, and only the knight can kick it, but because the bishop is unopposed, my dark squared bishop is unopposed because his bishop is light squared, so it is called an unopposed bishop. So only the knight can challenge the bishop on d4, and it is a very nice outpost for my bishop. And not to mention, my knight also is well placed at f4, although it is hanging, but it is well placed there. And now b takes c5, b takes c5, and at this point he made another mistake by moving the queen to e4. So here I have the opportunity to bring out my queen into the action by defending my knight and also creating some threats. So queen to h4 is a threat. So here what he decided to do is to defend the weak f2 pawn by moving the rook to d2. You see, so now there is a fork opportunity here. I can fork the rooks on d2 and e1, but let's see, what if white moves rook to e3, which is the best move here, rook to e3. Or what if white tries another move, like for example he tries to move maybe a4, totally forsaking the f2 pawn. So let's see what happens. So after bishop takes f2, and then king takes f2. So what's the next move here? Queen takes h2, and then king e3, knight g2. So this will be messy. This will be really messy for white. And then after, say, king d3, then knight takes e1, queen takes e1, rook takes a4, and black is winning in material in position. So going back, so he needs to protect the f2 pawn. So he sees that variation, that sacrifice on f2. So he has two options here to block the bishop from attacking the f2 pawn by moving rook to e3, or what he did in the actual game is rook to d2. So I seized the opportunity to fork those rooks, and then knight. He moved the knight. To e2, and at this point I decided to take the bishop on d2, and then he takes the knight on f4. I take the knight with the bishop, and there's a mating threat here now. So the best move here is h3, but he didn't make that move. Instead, he made king f1. Rook a to d8 occupies the open file and limits the king's escape squares. a4 is a mistake, because after queen h3, and he decided to move to make a move king e2, and now rook d2 is checkmate. So did you see how the game progressed from seizing the opponent's weaknesses and important squares on the board? So as you can see from this series of moves, after c5, I immediately see that white has a backward pawn, so I decided to exploit that on the next moves. He didn't take the knight here, so then he has a double pawn after I took the knight on f3, and now after this, after this couple of exchanges here, there. So at this point I am winning already, because the backward pawn on d4 is helpless, and after a series of moves, that bishop on d4 is well posted because of the pawn on c5. So it is a great outpost for my bishop, and also my knight is well placed on f4. And after that, I was able to do some tactical plays here, and yep, create a mating net, and then checkmate black's king on the 33rd move. So I hope you learned something here. You learned how to look for weaknesses in your opponent's position and how to exploit that weakness. Thank you very much, and enjoy learning chess. See you in the next video.